Telling your story can be a powerful part of the healing process. We all tell our stories in our own way and in our own time. And my friend Neil decided that today was his day. And he decided how he wanted to do it. You know, it doesn't matter when you tell your story, it just matters that you do. And Neil's hope is not only for his own healing and recovery, but he hopes to inspire others at the same time. This is Neil's story.
Well, my name is Neil Wiegert. I am a retired architect. Things have really been happening since the beginning of 2019 in my life, and that has brought me to this place where I want to share my story. Time I was 3 or 4 years old, and I remember being in a grove of trees on a relative's farm. I was with an older boy, not quite sure who he was, but anyway, he wasn't too much older than I was, and again, I was only like 3 or 4. I remember him saying, "Let's do what the animals do." And the next thing I knew, we were naked, and he was humping me. Well, I remember from that experience that something about it felt good. And I think this started an ongoing curiosity about other boys, and also an ongoing occasional encounters with other boys, messing around together with them. Also during my childhood, I remember receiving a couple of verbal wounds. I remember overhearing a conversation that was about me at the time, and then basically what I heard was, Neil will never amount to anything. I'm afraid Neil will never amount to anything. Then also I was told to my face that I'm a mama's boy. I'm not sure what that meant, or what the person who said that, but what it meant to me was that I'm soft, I'm weak, I'm effeminate. The time I was in junior high and high school, I had a male friend who wanted to mess around sexually. And that probably happened between ages of 13 and 17 for me. I remember going along with it begrudgingly, but I really didn't have any concept of boundaries at the time. I also didn't have anybody I could confide in. I didn't feel it was a topic that I could possibly consider bringing up at home, so I didn't. So I think it started to take root with me early in my childhood and adolescence that sex is pleasurable regardless of the gender. And I also remember throughout that time praying, God, don't let me turn out gay. Don't let me turn out gay. I don't even know where I learned the word gay, but somehow I knew it. I remained a virgin throughout my college years, but I felt like it was more of a curse than it was a blessing. As I listened to my college friends talk about their weekend sexual exploits, I would make mine up. Once out of college, I remember being hit on by another man in a bar when I was about 23 years old, and I caved into that one too. And after being together with him a couple of times, it just reinforced these feelings that I had pushed back into my mind from my childhood and adolescence. And the same-sex attractions are still there. Shortly after that time, or about that same time, I had my first sexual experience with a young lady. And I remember receiving her advances as much as anything because I wanted to prove to myself that I wasn't gay, that this is not who I was. A year or two later, I think I was about 24, I met my first real girlfriend. That girlfriend became pregnant, and she shortly thereafter became my wife. She was 18 at the time, I was 25. From that marriage we had two daughters. The marriage did not last. The marriage lasted for 18 years. And anyway, I had two daughters from that marriage. I know, looking back on it, that marriage was not a mistake, that was part of God's plan, and my two daughters are a testament to His plan and that part of His plan for my life. In 1981, I made a big decision, a big life decision. I accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. And I was hoping that decision would help me kill off these same-sex attractions that I had been fighting for the first 30 years of my life. I guess it worked for a while, but when I was about 34, I became convinced that something was really missing in my life, and that God really wanted me to experience the full life. So I wanted to be married, but I also wanted to express this side of me with this homosexual side of me that I was attracted to. That led to a couple of encounters with a couple of different men at the time. Well, that happened until my first wife confronted me with her suspicions. And immediately there brought so much pain into my first marriage that we had to work through, that I thought we worked through. I think it was about 1992 when I entered into counseling to save my first marriage. Well, it turned out that first marriage was not going to be saved. But for the first time in my life, that counselor taught me what real, authentic manhood looked like. And for that alone, I am eternally grateful. I also remember him saying to me one time after hearing all of my story, Neal, how could you have not turned out with homosexual tendencies after all that you have experienced and all that you have been through? My divorce from my first marriage became final. In 1997, I met my future wife, and we were married in late 1998. Then in 2008, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. And I had a follow-up surgery to try to cure that. Thankfully, it seemed to have done the job. But that surgery deals a sucker punch to your sex life. And what had been a quality sex life with my second wife up to that point was greatly compromised. I remember a couple of lessons that came out of that too. I remember thinking, and I still think, that sex is a gift. And as a gift, it can be given, and it can also be taken away. I also remember a second lesson that came out of that is that I realized, looking back on it, that too much of who I was as a man was tied to who I was as a sexually expressive man. Well, shortly after the surgery, I wanted to find something that would make me feel sexually alive again, and I started poking around on the internet, and that soon led to internet porn sites. About that same time, I remember hearing an Easter morning message where my pastor was preaching from the passage where Jesus is talking to the two women at the tomb and saying, "Why are you looking for the living among the dead? You will not find him here." And I remember thinking to myself regarding the internet porn, where am I looking for life among dead things? Well, also up to that time, I had a real passion to help hurting men, and that's diagnosis and ensuing surgery just killed off that passion. Early in this year, my wife, without letting me know, started some counseling on her own due to some concerns that she saw in our marriage and concerns with the way I related to our teenage son. One of the questions that her counselor asked her was Neil ever abused as a teenager? Then shortly after that, we had an unplanned meeting with another man over dinner that I attend church with, Ed Squire. Ed he has his own story of sexual abuse and has become an advocate for people struggling with issues of sexual abuse and related mental illness, and has started a nonprofit called Metoowhatnow. Then one morning, Ed and I had coffee together. I told him my story, and he asked me permission to video my story. Anyway, that's why I'm here today. My wife decided it was time to tell me that she was going through counseling and what the counseling was about and some of the things that's coming to light. And one of the things that came out of a very painful conversation with my wife is I started reading this book called The Wounded Heart: Hope for Adult Victims of Childhood Sexual Abuse. And as I read that book, for the first time, I'm starting to think that what happened to me as a child and adolescent wasn't just normal things that happen as they grow up, but this was sexual abuse. This qualifies as sexual abuse. With the encouragement of one of my church elders, I started attending an early morning men's group called The Heart of Man that was meeting at my church, helping men who deal with internet porn addiction. For me, it became a lot less about porn addiction than it became about my own sexual brokenness. One of the first times that I attended, our facilitator, at the end of our time together, handed all of us a rock. He told us to carry this rock around with us everywhere, as much as we could. So for about 2 weeks, I'm carrying this rock around with me. And for me at the time, it quickly became a metaphor for internet porn. It's dirty, it's clumsy, it's heavy, it demands an explanation, and so I carry it around in a bag to hide it. And it's premeditated. I'm always having to think about the darn rock and what I'm going to do with it. A couple weeks later, he asked us to take our rocks again with us, and this time to write on those rocks with a Sharpie the things that we had been believing about ourselves. throughout our lives. So I started writing on my rock, "You're gay. You're a mama's boy. You'll never amount to anything. You're unforgiven. You're an actor. You don't have what it takes." So, what I realized, the real purpose of this rock was a metaphor for all of the lies that I had been believing about myself and that I had been carrying around with me for almost 60 years. 60 years. I'm starting to believe that I'm not gay. For the first time, I can look at myself in the mirror and think, I am not gay. I am not a mama's boy. I do have what it takes. I am forgiven. I am not an actor. I feel more freedom right now than I have ever felt in my life, and that feels great.